Today's conversation is so special. We try to cram in as many filmmakers and films that we want to champion into the Talks program, so we rarely dedicate an entire roundtable to one film. But with Black News Terms and Conditions, directed by Kahlil Joseph and made with an incredible kind of galaxy of artists, we knew we had to do it because this is not just a film, it's like a cinematic universe, and there's so much there to unpack. There's so many layers. I mean, how many of you have seen it? Okay, most of you, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. So I'm really honored that we were able to put this together, and that too with such a stellar lineup, and I'm gonna invite them onto the stage one by one. First up, Kahlil Joseph, the director of Black News. Kaneza Schaal, who a collaborator and appears in the film, as you'll recognize.
Let's go, Kaneza.
Madebo Fatunde, one of the writers on the film. Raven Jackson, who was here a couple years ago. Director of All Dirt Roads Taste of Salt. Savanah Leaf, the director of Earth Mama.
Everybody.
And today's moderator, Jon-Sesrie Goff, an amazing filmmaker, curator, and program officer at the Ford Foundation. Thank you all for joining us, and over to you, John.
All right, thank you so much. Wow, so excited for this conversation today. Just to kick it off, I want to acknowledge that, for Black people and for communities whose histories and existence have been marginalized or erased or extracted, storytelling is much more than entertainment. It's continuity, it's resistance, it's ritual. And so what all of these artists here are a part of is a continuum. It's not born in an abyss. It is something that predates the technology of a camera. Some people have said that, Miss Unseen and stuff and the rituals that we see predates the camera itself, So I think of Oscar Michaud, I think of Julie Dash, I think of Kevin Jerome Everson, who insists that his work need not explain itself. It is something that reveals time itself. And so Black News isn't a single object, it's an ecosystem. It is a pulse that connects imagination, rhythm, community. It's a living continuum of Black thought and image. And so with that in mind, I want to ask Kahlil this question. You stated that Black News is less of a film and more of a space to enter, a collage of memory, resistance, and imagination. What world were you trying to build with this project?
Thank you. It's a great question. Thank you guys for all coming. It means a lot for us to be able to be up here and talk together. I'm a big fan of Savanah Leaf. She doesn't realize I'm more of a fan probably of hers than she understands. And honestly, Raven as well. I've told her in person, but I haven't really on wax told her how much of a fan of hers I am. And Madebo and Kaneza are probably my two richest collaborations I've had in my creative career. So it's an honor to be up here with these folks. To answer your question, one of the things I noticed is I've always wanted to make films in my life. And I noticed sometimes with the history of Black cinema, there's this insistence of a kind of commitment to reality. So, I love Boys in the Hood. I love even Killers of Sheep, these kinds of movies. But there's like this idea that we need to render what we experience. I kind of want to say exclusively. And I've always understood Hollywood to be make-believe. I've also understood Hollywood to be a very powerful tool in world making. So our understanding of AI is what Hollywood told us AI is, whether it's, the movie AI, or if you talk to real futurists and industrialists, they're really trying to figure out how to make Blade Runner a reality, right? So our ideas of the future, whether it's something as extreme as Blade Runner and AI, or something more, pedestrian, Wes Anderson or something like that, are things that filmmakers and novelists and artists have created for us to walk into. So as a Black person, I'm like, I don't want to walk into what I've understood our reality is. So in many ways, there's a perpetuation of our existence as we keep rendering it over and over and over again. So there was, it was important to me to kind of create the future I want to see, and not the reality I've always understood.
Yeah, I mean, whether it's the black box or the white cube, I mean, for us, it's a cathedral. And I mean, I ran into Ephraim Asili outside who saw the film last night. And I mean, he said seeing it with the audience and hearing the call and the response and people just reacting to the encyclopedic references, he said it was cathartic, and for anyone who's been to a movie theater with a Black audience, that is our release,
Yeah, and if you think about the history of Black life in America, it's essentially a series of imaginative, like, freedom for enslaved people was an insane thought. That had a huge imaginative leap. There was no idea that was even a possibility. It was an impossibility if you really understood the circumstances and the realities they were faced with. But the Harriet Tubmans of the world and the hundreds and thousands of others who imagined a brighter future, that required Hollywood-level imaginative leaps, right? Or Dr. King, or anybody we want to kind of valorize. Now, historically looking back, that shit was impossible. The white water fountains, there was no other version of that. That was reality as they understood it. So it required a huge imaginative leap. So as filmmakers and storytellers, for me, I'm just pulling from what my family and my father and my mother taught me was our history. It's like, oh, I have to create the future that I want to walk into, and not necessarily what I understood to be.
Right, the freedom of form. I mean, we've done it with music, right? And once you break form or break anything, and you think of what Toni Morrison said, the responsibility of freedom, I'm paraphrasing, you got to free somebody else, and Raven, in your work, you use stillness and quietness in your narrative structure. Can you talk about the intentionality behind that, and how you want audiences to sit and reflect with the images and the sort of the stillness in your work?
Yes, and it's an honor to be here talking on this panel. I really love Kahlil and his work, and so I'm really grateful to be here and with you all. But in my work, or in Altered Roads, I was really interested in honoring the pace it seemed like certain moments wanted, and if it felt like the moment wanted to linger, to allow it to linger and not feel constrained to like cut it if it didn't want it, like to move at a certain pace if it was asking for stillness or slowness. And also I really thought a lot, and this came to me after the edit was done, that I would often say before screening the film that I would like the audience as an invitation to let the film wash over you, and to be in your body, because I hope that stillness, that space is, yes, also an invitation to like really be present. So that's a lot I was thinking about with that.
The invitation to be present. Kaneza.
Raven, will you tell the people the name of the film you're talking about?
Yes, it's All Dirt Road's Taste of Salt, my first film.
Yes.
And I'll say, so
Incredible.
for those who don't know, because I haven't really talked about it openly yet, is I openly invited certain collaborators and filmmakers specifically to be featured in my film, which there was no protocol necessarily, and I had only seen Raven's short films. She was still in post-production for All Dirt Roads, and I called her out of the blue. She's the only, I think, key collaborator who I didn't previously know. I cold called her and I said, hey, I'm making this project. I would love for you to kind of be on the track with me, essentially. And she, to her credit, she showed up and brought her own cinematographer, Jon-Sesrie, genius collaboration in their own right.
Yes.
And got busy in a way that I still am, so Bradford Young and I were shooting in another part of the environment, and Raven and Jomo were shooting in another. And on the last day, Bradford and I finished early. And so it was an environment just like this. She was shooting in a movie theater. And Bradford and I got to sit in the back and watch Raven and Jomo work. And I've seen other filmmakers work, and I've never experienced a more elegant filmmaker, direct actors. And I actually was taking notes. She doesn't realize this. I was like, oh, this is how you can relate to. I mean, everyone in the crowd, all the extras, everybody was so calm and so patient. Nobody was rushing. The AD wasn't yelling. They were behind schedule. No one cared. And it was amazing. It was, to this day, it was a moment I'll forever remember.
Oh, thank you, Kahlil. Thank you. But when Kahlil calls, you answer that call and you show up. There's no way I was saying no to that. So, thank you.
Kaneza, you also work in theater, and you also work through ritual and embodiment. How did that shape your collaboration here?
Y'all were just talking about white boxes and black boxes and how we gather. There was that, I don't know if anyone was there, not last night before, Saturday, but there's this beautiful moment where that long shot of Assata Shakur comes up and we all started clapping. Yes. And I was like, there's probably a memorial service in Havana. If there was one in New York that y'all knew about, I didn't know about it. And it was like there was a need in that room. Like we had a need together in that room, and it felt almost like we were feeding the art object. You know what I mean? Like the film needs something from all of us. And I thought about that a lot last night. I've had the pleasure of working on an art center in Kigali, Rwanda, that's gonna open in December. And the first thing we did was put up a tapestry and put a bunch of performances in front of it and have people eat in that space. Yes. And that sense of how are we going to feed the art objects in our lives. And when this film gets devoured by the world on its own terms, I look forward to the conditions that people will set up to watch it and to imbibe it together. And I hope we gather not in a white box and not in a black, some next thing. We need some next way of watching film together. And I feel like this is a real provocation towards that.
Yeah, it's got to involve. I mean, they say it's a distribution crisis, but I think it's a media film appreciation literacy crisis, and we have to reimagine consumption because it's a public health issue.
Speak on it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I've never.
Savanah, now your work, it bridges sport, spirit, cinema. Can you talk about how rhythm guides your process?
Rhythm. I think I don't know. I guess like I was an athlete for people that don't know, and that's where like I started my life, and I transitioned from sports to making films, and I think we were just talking about this up there. There's like this spatial awareness that I think I translate into film, and some of that comes from like envisioning what you're about to film and looking at all the possibilities and what's going to go wrong and coming up with solutions in your head ahead of time. Some of that comes from like intuitiveness on the court. That was like my specialty back then, was like so I wasn't a great practice player, but I was great on the court at game time, and it was about like making these like quick decisions. Sometimes your body responds before your mind does, you know? And so when I think about rhythm or pacing, or I don't know if this is answering your question, but like I think about those sort of split decisions and what you're intuitively feeling like you need to do in the moment, and you prepare so much beforehand. You know, you write a script, or in my case, I write a script and I shot list endlessly, and I do all this stuff with everybody to prepare. But then when it comes to like on the day, on the set with a couple actors, it's like you're just waiting for that like impulse or that like flicker of like, oh, that feels honest. And that I don't know if that's a rhythm or what it is, but it's like that's what I'm searching for, and that's what like excites me in creating art, I guess. Yeah.
And collaboration, teamwork.
Yeah, and collaboration as well. Yeah.
And Madebo, you bring a unique lens to world building, a technologist lens. Can you talk about how you translate code, interface, or systems into narrative?
It's fascinating to hear myself described that way. Thank you. But I've worked in tech. I am not. I wouldn't call myself a technologist because I'm not technical. I don't code. What I did for the software company I worked for was long-term forecasting and sort of futures research, and doing that within an organization is, well, let me take a step back. Any form, any system's sense of time is a certain rhythm of narration, right? With a company, you are, usually you have a quarterly cadence, right? You have also, sometimes that's punctuated by your competitor dropping a product, or you know, some other fluctuation in the market somewhere else that changes behavior and changes people's sense of time. And I don't come from that world. I'm a poet, and I've always been very driven by my ear. And so that aspect of thinking about the future is natural to me. And I've done a lot of work, you know, in philanthropy, in communities, in sort of other sort of organizing spaces, trying to offset my corporate footprint and help us sort of imagine futures otherwise. And one of my collaborators within that work, another quarter of the Futurist Writers Room is here, Tony Patrick.
What's up, Tony?
And I will say that when we are, and you know, futures is not like some priesthood, like everybody has a stake in it. When we try to relax our hold, right, on the rhythm or the style of narration of futures that's given to us, right, and start reaching for something else, you have to find a way to disrupt that rhythm. And I think the first thing that smacked me in the face when Kahlil sent me the first clip of Black News, and I'm talking about the Installation Project here, the 2-channel version. was that it felt like something that was working really hard and really intentionally and really conscious of sound, right? To disrupt that rhythm for you, right? And to buy your suspension of time. I'm also a fantasy writer, so half of the game there is to get people to let go of how they expect things to be. And I think if anything, that is sort of my specialty in my work across mediums, across contexts, is like, let this wash away, right? When sort of a caterpillar decides it's time to change, first they form their cocoon, and then they completely liquefy. And within any system, within any group of people, within any gathering, that is the most terrifying thing, is to let go of what we know ourselves to be and to reach for something else. And I think that's what I try to help people do. That's what I hope my art does. And that's what I felt. I think that's the resonance that got me and Kahlil talking on the phone for like 4 hours when we had our first phone call. But that's kind of how I see rhythm and transformation and making worlds.
Let's stay there. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was to speak to a little bit of some of the stuff that me and Madebo collaborated on there. Kaneza plays a character in the film named Fumilayo Akichukwu, who is a reincarnation of W.E.B. Dubois in the future as an artist, as a curator, as a writer, as a scholar. And there's something that we created called the resonance field, which exists in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And it's a kind of land art. It's a kind of take on land art. Technically it's ocean art, but there's a whole bunch of scholarship and research that went into the resonance field that Madebo and I talked about a lot. But we never discuss it in the film. We just kind of refer to it. It's almost like the Force in Star Wars. It's something you kind of keep mentioning, but never really detail in any kind of granular. And I called up someone at Stanford and I said, "Hey, can the scholar that I met in Africa do a lecture?" Her character in the film. And they were like, "Sure, can give me some more details." And I kind of gave them this fictional account of this person that I met in West Africa. And they were like, "That sounds super interesting. Like, let's talk about it." Cut to, we go to Stanford to do a lecture with Fumilayo Akichukwu. So Kaneza's in character as she doesn't exist. She has the makeup, she has the fake accent, and Madebo writes a lecture for the Stanford faculty and students, technically, arguably, some of the smartest people in the country. In the African American literature department, everybody's there. And after the lecture, they're coming up to Fumilayo, asking her to cite her in their research. As a result of Madebo's being able to comport himself into now a Stanford level scholar presenting his foundings and his scholarship based on a fictional thing that we created in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And that's just
Hold up. To be fair, we had spent like 3 years with Saidiya Hartman and Fred Moten and Christina Sharp and like all these crazy scholars coming through the writer's room. And I'm trying to, mix some of that down into
I was there
a
too.
45-minute lecture.
I'm not writing that lecture though.
Okay, there were lots of other brilliant people in the room. Kaneza was there. Kahlil was there. So it was not me.
And so it's really it's the two of these that work together to create the Fumilayo Akichukwu kind of universe that I would still love to find a way to get out into the world. At one point we talked about Fumilayo only appearing in character, and we'll talk about world building. That was something I wanted to do with the film, is actually get the resonance field and Fumilayo out into the world first. So by the time they watched the film, they were already predisposed to what the resonance field was and who she was. Again, it's kind of like, I learned this from Star Wars. They released a comic book of Star Wars before the movie came out. As you know, it targets that audience, right? That group. And it did so well that it helped get people lined up. That's really what created people lined up around the block when Star Wars came out in 1977.
I'm glad we didn't do it. I'm gonna tell you why. I was watching it on Saturday and I was thinking about artifice and how much what, to me, makes the kind of narrative intervention in the 85 minutes we're together is this sense of artifice, this archness, this outside of American psychological realism as the default performance cadence of watching someone on screen. And so I think it's that, I wonder if it would have worked if it were natural, because it's so arched.
That's a good point. That's a good point. I mean, that's what the universe has determined to be so.
Hey, what June Jordan say, we are not the problem, we are the possibility. And you hinted at it in terms of the realism in Hollywood films. And so I want to unpack that a little bit in terms of race and how you deal with it in work.
I mean, I'm curious what they think too, in terms of like the movies you would make if. So there's something that happens in Hollywood for anyone here who's a filmmaker. Even if you're successful, people tend to default into what they think will get made, as opposed to what someone taught me, which changed my whole thing, is what will never get made. Right. If I start from that premise, like, just write the thing that you don't ever think. No one's gonna, like, Hollywood is never gonna pick up the phone once they read and that, I mean, Black News is a version of that. Some of the best films I think that have been made in Hollywood are versions of that. But I'm curious what y'all's version of that, like if someone wrote you a blank check, like really thinking outside the box.
Yeah, the line between expectation and freedom.
Yeah, I mean, what comes up for me is that there's a project I'm excited about. I'm not going to like go too deep into it, but that is still playing. I love playing with form, in my work. And I love what Kahlil just said, what's the project you have that will never get made? I feel like something that's come up for me is that we also have to give ourselves permission, to like really allow ourselves to explore that deeply. I think it can be often it's, at least in my experience, it's you want your practical in a lot of ways. Like, well, if I want to put all this time into writing a script or into pitching something, let me have it be the thing I know will get made and just keep this to myself. And it's been really freeing for me to really give myself permission to explore different facets of myself. I've done one feature. My next one isn't necessarily going to be exactly like that, and I'm excited about that. But that's what comes up for me off of that.
Yeah, I'm like a very practical thinker. So like, I've been, I guess like off the back of Earth Mama, which was the film I did. I got into a space where I was like, man, I feel like in filmmaking, you have to wait for other people to give you permission to make anything financially. And so I decided to make a short, which was called Run. And I just like self-financed it and made it, and it showed in a gallery space, and then made Run 2, and like we did that for the past 2 years, and I had a team of people that are close collaborators, and that was like me doing the thing that like where I wasn't thinking about anybody else other than like me and what I wanted to tell at that time, and I'm actually in those pieces. So it, like, in a way, it's like my version of like a self-portrait painting, and when I think about like a feature length, like narrative feature length, I might convert that to a feature length, but like it's really hard to even sit down sit down and write oftentimes because my headspace goes to something really practical. I want to make the things I write. And it's hard to break that like mental barrier of like, yeah, maybe if I was solely a writer, I would break that mental barrier. But as a filmmaker, it becomes hard to think outside of like, the practicalities of making a project.
That's why I think a film like this is so important, because it expands what you feel is possible. Like, I love what you said, like it takes imagination first. And when I watched it for the first time, like last
Years
night.
ago.
Yeah. Well, I watched cuts earlier. Well, I watched it for the first time last night, and it was just like, I'm so grateful this film exists, because I think it expands when we're talking about being practical. Like, if you were being practical, this never would exist, you know? And so I'm grateful for your insistence on that, on pushing that, because, yeah, I think that's really important.
One of the things too, I mean, I'm assuming there's filmmakers and creators in the crowd. It's an assumption, but I just have to assume. And when you go to when I go to see a Christopher Nolan film, or I don't know, PTA, it's just so overwhelming to think like, yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. I mean, as much as I, know that I'm gifted and talented, I can do anything that I want. I also recognize like, I don't know if that's my way of creating necessarily, and so I would say for you guys, we all have, I mean, one of the things I noticed, I mean, I know it's called Black World Making, but I was talking, my wife Anya, who produced the film, I was like, it almost feels like we should be talking about how we found our voices or something, because that's ultimately what distinguishes each one of us. It's like we all have an individual, unique voice that got us to the place that we're at. And that's what makes any one of y'all unique. Whether it's $100 million or, $50,000 or whatever it is. We're also living in an amazing time where you don't need that much stuff. I mean, everyone knows Kai Cenat's bigger than anybody in this room, in terms of creating something at this moment. And he didn't have anything but his camera on his, but that's his voice. He's comfortable and he's confident in that space. I'm not saying but if you're a filmmaker, there's a way that your voice is going to resonate simply and profoundly. You don't need a lot of money, and it's really about figuring that out. I mean, I'm a big fan of all these people up here, and it's because of all the stuff I've watched, of all the stuff I've read. Their voice just like cut right through in small and profound ways. I mean, I'll never forget, Kaneza's and I met through our partners. They're friends. My wife and her partner were friends. Former partner, so actually, right. Her former partner were friends. And we met at our house casually, not much exchange. And cut to, it might have been 2 years later, we were both getting an award during COVID, and we were in a cohort. And it was on Zoom. And I was like, God, I recognize her. Oh, that's okay, that's on you. Okay, yeah, hey, what's going on? And then she gave an acceptance speech. She was the first one to give an acceptance. I've told her this. She was the first one to give an acceptance speech, and it was off the dome. I didn't see no paper, and it was so intimidating and so profound and so beautiful and so thoughtful that I know for me, and I can think of all the other cohorts, we were so shook that we had to go after her and like give an acceptance speech. And I called her after that and invited her to participate in Black News. That was how her voice cut through, was in an acceptance speech. I hadn't seen her theatrical work. I did my research after I heard her acceptance speech, and I was like, oh, she's incredible. But it shows in really subtle and different, profound ways, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. There's something about this idea, hearing both of you talk about what you would do with a blank check and then practicality and everything, and Raven, you using the word insistence. you're the only person who had shot a feature-length narrative film that Kahlil invited into the organism. Everybody else hadn't had nothing to do with that before. And the insistence, the leadership, the auteurship that it takes to have lateralized process, to invite people into creativity, to give people space for voice, is ferocious. And you and Anye have been killers on behalf of everyone in the project. And I have been flabbergasted by and continue to be, like, the section of the film that I had the honor of directing, a shot made it in of this hallway. Several shots. No. That wasn't. No. I'm just trying to talk about one shot. My point is about one shot.
I'm not going to interrupt you.
My point is about one shot. There are several. I'm very proud. But I was trying to talk about one thing, which is this hallway of Dubois walking. It's like a big white stripe in these doors, and him going through. And I was thinking about Saidiya's text and thinking about that shot, and that was really like the level of freedom to imagine that is absurd, Kahlil, and it is a product of the insistence that you made on behalf of everyone. And so I just have to say that publicly.
Thank you. But there's also, so if anyone has ever heard of the Underground Museum in Los Angeles, it was started by my brother, and he was a painter, and a very straightforward painter. And at one point in his gallery representation, he told his gallery that he wanted to do more than just paint canvases of black bodies. And they discouraged him to do so. And what that created was a profound divorce between my brother and the traditional art world. This is back in the early 2000s, when the idea of being a successful artist and not having a gallery, I mean, still to this day, I don't know anybody who can do it. And he, at the time, my father had passed away recently, and left my brother and I some money. And my brother spent all his money on creating what you guys have maybe have heard of as the Underground Museum. But there was no one had done anything like that before. There was no business model. There was no suggestion that he was going to be successful. His wife was saying, you're spending all of our money not making canvases that sell into this space that you don't own, that has no business model. And I say that to say he was really focusing his energy on what he understood to be his voice. I mean, he had alienated and ostracized everybody in the art world that was going to make him any type of fame, money, or notoriety. And now he's passed away, but the Underground Museum absolutely is supporting his market as an artist, if that makes sense. So his paintings, not unlike Warhol, are a result of the work he did outside of the painting. Does that make sense? So your voice sometimes is not even just like what you make. It's, in Kaneza's case, it's her acceptance speech for this random award online that shook me to my core. I wish I could have recorded it. I would love to share it one day. I mean, it was, do you remember that? You remember that? I mean, I'm still intimidated when I think about it. Like, I want to be able to do that one day. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think that's what competition and capitalism does. It suppresses individual voices, right? Because this Western idea that there's a singular truth. You know, I have a friend, Muhammad Umar. He said, "Why are Americans so always speak of singular truths when Rumi said truth came down and was broken like a mirror and we all got a piece of it, you know, so we all are holding a piece of the truth. And so that's why it's important for everyone to use their individual voice. And I see it all the time where people say, oh, so-and-so is making a film about this, I can't do it. And it's like, who cares? Because it's going to be a different film when you make it.
How many filmmakers are in the audience? Many. Amazing. Amazing. Oh, is there time for Q&A?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that okay? Are you guys
okay
with the Q&A?
There's
Okay.
a mic coming.
We've got a mic.
We can hear you guys too, though, by the way. If you guys want to say
Hello. My name is Kason. I only raised my hand so fast, so I have to go in a second. So I want to make sure I got my question out. Huge fan of this panel. Huge fan of everybody. Kahlil specifically, Black News changed so much for me. And I want to ask about that because that came out maybe a couple years before I really started doing this. And when I started doing this, I was looking for more people who looked like me, honestly, that were making films and doing things. Someone's like, you need to watch this, you need to watch this. And it was, like you were saying, very disruptive. And it was really beautiful to me because I'd only seen one type of thing. And I knew that there was more to making this than just one way, you know, just like a 3-act structure, but there's more than one way. Condensing a lot into a question. Because we see that now and we know that, and to me, that's like a very prolific film that we've seen, how do you find ways to continue to be disruptive when people expect disruption?
It's this film was made as a result of the source material, which was Black News, the work of art. If I was adapting a Zora Neale Hurston book or something, I don't think it would show up like this necessarily. But that goes back to my thing about your voice. Your voice will determine everything, and everybody here has an individual voice in the same way, and everybody will never be, the universe will never recreate any version of us. And so if your work looks like other people or sounds like other people, that's just your process of figuring out your voice. I think in the beginning, please correct me if I'm wrong, you guys, but for me in the beginning, my work was me working through people that I liked. Cinematographers, other filmmakers, there was like moments where I would literally try to recreate the same focal length, the same lighting conditions, right? And I don't know anybody whose work ultimately, I remember when I first started making stuff, I was like, I had no context and it was kind of uncomfortable because it didn't look like the people. If I told you who I was trying to emulate, you would laugh out loud because it's so different. It's kind of like Godard trying to, if you talk to Godard, he said Humphrey Bogart was his guy. His films don't look nothing like Humphrey Bogart's films. So for me, it always comes down to voice and training. You got to learn your craft. I probably prioritize that over your voice because your voice will emerge. But if you learn writing, if you learn cinematography, if you learn working with actors, if you learn production design, just jump deep into the craft. Just like Kobe Bryant, all the greatest basketball players you love, they have a style that emerged, but they know their fundamentals are their left hand is stronger than your right? Like, that's because they work. And that's what I would encourage any filmmaker in the audience is like learn your craft better than anybody. And now with YouTube, there's no excuse. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi. My name is Jamoke. Very grateful to be here and thank you for thank you for this world that y'all have created. I'm asking a question with grace of first drafts because I think I'm trying to blend a couple things together. So let me know if this isn't coherent. But Kaneza, you said something on Friday that I've been thinking about a lot. You were talking about living in the many as a form and as this counter to individualism, right? The idea of the hero or the idea of the individual author. And that's something that seems like it's very present in the way y'all have collaborated on this project and other projects. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the collaboration with ancestors in the process of making the film, editing the film, writing the film. I mean, I think that from the reference to cultural ancestors, the resonance field as an ancestor, like these enslaved Africans who are in the water. Kahlil references to your family and your brother, and may both of their memories be a blessing. I'm just wondering if y'all can talk about how ancestors are present in the process for you. And also, I think I'd be remiss, Ravi, if I didn't mention the first time I saw Altered Roads, Taste of Salt in the theater, I could feel my grandmother's hands at the end. My grandmother passed away 20 years ago. It took me a second to actually register what it was that I was feeling because I recognized and I couldn't place it. And so this idea that connection isn't lost, that connection is present, thinking about the film as ritual and again, thinking about how we feed it and how it feeds us, I think I'm really curious about that connection to ancestors and how it's present in your work, because I think as an audience member, it was something that was very present for me viewing the film.
Yeah, first off, that's a really beautiful comment, and thank you for sharing that. I'm really moved. But I thought a lot about my grandmothers in the making. I'm speaking of Aldert Rhodes now. I thought a lot about my grandmothers. I had a lot of conversations I wouldn't have had if not for that film. And so I'm really grateful that I was in the process of making it and they were still alive and I could have those conversations with them. But I looked a lot at my maternal grandmother in particular, photo albums. She's from Crystal Springs, Mississippi. We ended up filming in Mississippi. It was a reference for costume, location, all of that. And so, yeah, I mean, I know for me, my process will evolve as I make more work, but I hold stuff like that close. Some of the characters' names are personal to me, so it feels close to me when I'm making it because I want that and I don't need to tell anybody. I don't always tell folks what's really close to me, but I know I like anchors like that when I'm making the work.
Okay. That's a great question. For me, I think I didn't know half of I didn't know my Black side of my family. I don't know my father until I was 30. So like I didn't know that side of me, and so some of my work is about like connecting to that side of me through like art, you know, and through creating and researching. Like that was a part of this film that really resonated with me, was like kind of like journey tracking your life. Like I did 23andMe and like, you know, like try to piece together my lineage. And so yeah, I think that's like really present in like everything I do, every writing I do, everything like that's, you know, I'm not even aware of, it like seeps through because it's like me trying to understand how I'm, you know, the person I am today. So it's like unavoidable, you know, or is that the right word? It's like, it's gonna be there no matter what.
Hi. So I was very struck by the ability of you all to be able to sort of like translate African time and spirit into the space of film and just like the screen. And they're like at the end of the movie, one of the characters says, "Oh, like, do you remember the future?" And I just been thinking about that for a few days because I went to go see the film on Friday. And this is kind of a question. I'm like also talking and just trying to work through it myself and want to hear from y'all actually also like what that meant. Also like not even what it meant, but like what, like when coming to that question in the process, like how did you come to that question? Because there's so many images and words and scholars that like are in this piece. So it's just like, how did you deal with time? Because it's interesting because we kind of have to let go of time to not only experience the film, but I also know when making it probably like you had to also do that as well. So like how, just can you talk about that a little bit? Because it's very, you know, it's very amazing.
It's a very good question. Thank you. Do you remember the future? Saidiya Hartman wrote that line. I can only interpret it the way I interpret it, but it kind of goes back to what I was saying a little bit earlier. And if you think about the realities that we now live in, being at Lincoln Center, being at this panel, making the movies that we make, going to the schools that we go to, etc., is a result of these people in the past who held a vision of the future that didn't exist, that we now live in effortlessly. You know, our ancestors. Like my grandmother can't even fathom what I do for a living. Like there's no context. My parents don't. There was no model for what I do. There was no model for what my brother made. There's no, and that's a bit of. This is my interpretation of what Saidiya Hartman wrote. I'm not. You're gonna have to ask her the next time you corner her at a cafe or a lecture or something. But there is something about having a vision of the future so strong that doesn't yet exist, that obviously becomes so realized and so real that people like you and me are just take it for granted, you know? Like I take getting on the train for granted, staying in the hotel I'm staying at now for granted, using my American Express for granted, like these kind of things that just my grandmother couldn't have fathomed, but I'm imagining was the hope and the dream for her grandchildren, you know? So I talk to these guys sometimes about this. We're living in a really intense moment, you know, as we always have. And I have ideas about what the future looks like that I feel so strong about, but it's also, it sounds insane, but I can't imagine it sounds as insane of like our reality for people who are in bondage in this country. Like they can't even, it's a psychedelic experience, but if they were to walk into this room and experience this talk, for example, you know? And so that for me is some kind of, you know, remember the future, something like, right, my vision of the future is nowhere as insane, no matter how crazy it is, it's not going to be as insane as things that have actually already transpired for us or something. Does that make sense? It doesn't address all your other incredible questions about African time and the film and making the film and all that, but.
If I may, I think there's it took a lot to make anybody comfortable with this version of the world, and it takes a lot to foreclose any other conceivable way of being. And we are taught to invisibilize all of that work, right, that the state does, or, you know, the country, or, you know, whatever you are inside of, your organization does to make itself seem inevitable. But there is a constant culling of other imaginaries, of other futures, of other bodies, of other ways that things could be. And so to me, when I hear remember the future, one of the first things I think of is recovering, right, some of those foreclosed possibilities, right? There was never, I don't think there was ever a human who couldn't imagine what it was like to walk freely, you know? There were, I think there's a lot of energy that it requires to make that less than possible for someone, right? And so I think just first, going back into the histories and seeing what people tried, right? My parents, for instance, one of my favorite books called World Making After Empire. My parents were the first generation. My dad was born a colonial subject, right? Within his childhood, they received national sovereignty. And in a lot of different ways, they watched that, you know, have effects that they, you know, didn't hope for, didn't wish for, right? And then their dream of sovereignty became, let's get to the States, right? This is a failed project. And it wasn't because they didn't try, right? It wasn't because everybody was always corrupt, right? It wasn't because nobody had a dream of a functioning society, right? Or like holding on to your own minerals, right? It's never because of that. But it's made inconceivable in some ways to imagine or act otherwise, right? And we've all learned a lot about the mechanisms that make that possible, but we don't get to spend as much time thinking about the mechanisms of gaining any degree of freedom, right? In your own personal life, right? In what you do tomorrow. And there's a concept called anarchist calisthenics. And it starts with the premise that one day you're going to be required for your own freedom, for your own protection, for the sake of your community, to break a really big law, right? If you're living right, something you're doing is being made illegal by people who do not want for you to feel as free as you should as a person walking under the sun, right? And so if you don't start taking any degree of freedom to imagine yourself outside of the strictures that are made for you now, then when that day comes, you're gonna fail because you're human, right? And this is a lesson that our ancestors have known, that our ancestors have learned, and that, we've built a society to remove this lesson from ourselves because it requires something of you. And so when I hear remember the future, one of those things is like reclaim that responsibility, right? To try, to just gain that extra degree of freedom and take on, that stress of, I gotta do something with this.
Yeah, Saidiya Hartman reminds us that we live in the afterlife of property, right? And Black News offers us the afterlife of possibility. It's a living archive. It's the evolution of a fugitive broadcast. And I just appreciate you all for your generosity, for your work, and for your imagination and creativity. And thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody.